It's almost the end of the year, and therefore it's the podcast I know you've been waiting for. Maybe. It's my Review of the Year podcast. Hi, I'm Tony. I'm an author, presenter at Sky Sports, and years ago I went to the jungle and got ill. Very ill. So this is my podcast adventure to find more energy. It's packed with biohacking, science, health tech, supplements, and some of the most well-known experts on the planet.
This is something I spent 4 months of my life doing with electrodes glued to my head so that you can do a lifetime worth of meditation.
Decide what you don't give a fuck about, which is something you don't care about.
Some of it gets quite out there.
I had some stem cells sent up to my house that I had stored, and then I injected myself with mannitol.
And we even hack hangovers.
Alcohol is poisonous. So is water and oxygen in the wrong dosage.
So that's my podcast, Zestology. Live life with energy, vitality, and motivation. Hello again. Yes, it's been quite a year, and I've cherry-picked my best bits for you, as always, in this Review of the Year podcast, in an epic that travels all over the place, from the Health Optimisation Summit to Glastonbury and even Thailand. This is my Review of the Year 2022. And before we go any further, I may be sounding slightly chesty and slightly coldy today. It's difficult when you're not feeling very zesty and you do a podcast called Zestology. But being struck by flu, it turns out all the biohacks in the world just are no replacement for a bit of rest. So that's what I've been doing the last few days. I always sort of beat myself up a bit when I get ill, but I shouldn't, because it's, it just happens sometimes, doesn't it? And I have been boshing the liposomal vitamin C and the zinc and getting lots of rest and meditation. But I certainly needed it as well. But I'm on the road to recovery, and feeling a little bit more zesty because I'm recording this Zestology podcast of the year for you. So let's get straight into it. I do this every year, and I think it's probably the 7th time I've done it or something like that. Excited to get going and go straight to January 2022. So almost a year ago. And one of my all-time favourite podcast interviewees, Dean Karnazes, came back on the podcast. The man who runs for fun. He runs miles and miles. He's now all sorts of crazy job titles. I think he's a UN ambassador for maybe for health or for running or something like that. He's very, very famous for doing these ultra marathons through Death Valley in 50-degree heat, and he's just an inspiring individual. He's a really nice person as well. A few years ago we recorded a podcast in person at Facebook headquarters in London, and we did another one on episode 366. So here is Dean Karnazes from January 2022.
Older, wiser, slower, stronger. And I think that kind of sums up my running at this point. I mean, it sounds crazy to say this, but I've been doing this for, half a century. How am I still holding up? My first book was kind of a coming of age book, learning about this crazy world of ultramarathoning. And, 5 books later, this is kind of a sequel to that, where I talk about, after all these years, am I still running? Am I still passionate about it? Am I still chasing dreams? What has happened in those years since that first book? So it brings people along on the ride. I think a lot of people, it's interesting to read about another person's reality. And certainly my reality is much different than most. And I try to give the reader a glimpse of, what my life is like. And it's unusual. It's very atypical. So I think people enjoy that.
Aging and exercise, and how you're experiencing aging, because obviously, this podcast has been going about 8 years now, Dean, and so my audience is aging with me, and it's something that we start to think about a little bit more, as I'm sure you have, going from, as you say, running 50 years, what was it you're saying, slower and stronger. How do you consider the aging process through the lens of your fitness and your exercise?
I've adapted as I've matured, as I've ripened.
Ripened, absolutely.
I have to work twice as hard now to keep the same speed that used to come easy to me. So, you notice your speed just, slowly declines over the years. So I'm training a lot harder. I'm training a lot smarter as well. So I'm running fewer miles, but at a different pace. I've changed up my workouts quite a bit. The other thing I never do is sit down. So I have this policy where, from the moment I get out of bed in the morning until the moment I lay back down, I never sit down. Obviously if I've got to, go on a car ride or on a flight, I have to sit down. But other than that, if I don't have to sit down, I don't. So I'm on my feet all day, and I'm basically just bouncing around on my toes and, bending my knees. And that's one thing I do. The other thing, I've modified my diet to the point where I'm very refined in what I eat. And, I just kind of self-selected foods that leave me feeling energetic and healthy, and those that leave me feeling lethargic, I've cut from my diet altogether. So I've kind of, reined in on the foods I was eating to try to, better manage inflammation and everything, that comes along with a better diet.
Okay, so we are off and running on my review of the year podcast, and from Dean to February, and I always love talking about longevity. Longevity has become an increasing theme on this podcast, and I spoke to Dr. Tam Lewis, who I've known for many years, and Dr. Tam and I talked longevity and living well, and she was in Ibiza, and it just looked so gorgeous in the background. And I think we recorded this on February the 21st or something like that. It was very cold and very dank in London, and it just looked perfect in Ibiza. So she was getting her longevity game on point in Ibiza, and I spoke to her on Zestology.
My concern is that a lot of people is they think that health is given to you by doctors. It's given to you. There's something goes wrong, you go to the doctor, they give you something, and you feel better. But slowly, you move away from. You may move away from a baseline. You get older, right? I'm in my 40s like you, and everything starts to, this is when we start aging, and aging is accumulated cell damage over time. And what you do now really matters. You can't get to 50 and then go, oh shit, that's it. I'm destined to age. It's really working on these different systems now. But I think, that I've met a lot of very obsessed vegetarian, supplement taking, slightly unhappy people with, slightly damaged relationships that are obsessed with, have to have this many supplements, and that isn't health, that isn't longevity. That is, and they then think that they are creating longevity through what they do, but actually not being relaxed, not being fluid, not being. If you look at the people that age and live well, those are the people that we should be studying and emulating.
Absolutely. And as a parent, I suppose that as well. I mean, one of the things we talk about a lot, having a 2-year-old who obviously loves ice cream and would just eat that breakfast, lunch and dinner if he wanted, that, we try and get some good food into him, but we're not religious about denying him the pleasures of life, like ice cream and cupcakes, if they come along, because really we just feel that's a much better way to a sort of a balanced life and a balanced sort of emotions around food as well, and it's probably the same for adults too, isn't it?
I think it is. You build in a sort of tolerance. Our bodies are very forgiving. If you do what you do 80% of the time matters. We can forgive the 20% of crap if you build a healthy system to tolerate, crap. Yeah. Or poison,
it is healthier than being so religious about sort of 100% of the time having the vegan whatever it is, that you're actually sort of you're stressed about when it just goes slightly out of whack or when something isn't quite right.
I mean, stress parenting has a lot to can cause a lot of damage. Stress is blood vessels contract, your nervous system contracts, your posture goes under, your digestion suffers. So there's much to be said for that more liberal way of being.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's the stress thing as well. I know you've been very interested in histamine intolerance, which is something that I discovered a few years ago, and it's just made a huge difference to my life. And I know the links between stress and histamine intolerance and stress, and the emerging body of research and science that suggests that is a real thing. We went to Cyprus in October, and my heart rate variability was, you mentioned the Oura ring earlier on, that was the highest it's ever been. It was just wonderful. And it's not as high now, but I can't live in Cyprus all the time. I mean, I suppose I probably could, but it's just, I would love to sort of get my HRV up there all the time and really look after myself. But it's not necessarily practical just to be on holiday all the time, is it?
No, but I do think that those periods where you do check in, sort of plug in and, reboot can, give you a systems upgrade that lasts, and then till the next check-in and reboot and upgrade, if you know what I mean. Yeah. But it's worth, having that insight into how your body works and heart rate variability and what impacts it. I think what I've noticed incredibly is breath work, for sure. That when I was using hyperbaric oxygen chambers to help long COVID, when I do a moment with the Oura ring in there, my heart rate variability would be 50% higher than if I was just resting, doing the same. So it does have a real impact.
That's amazing, isn't it? Yeah. Actually, I've noticed if I do some breath work just before I go to sleep, the first couple of hours of my heart rate variability overnight is just spikes so much. So same sort of thing as what you were talking about there. The breath work, I wonder if there's something about sort of a long COVID or a sort of a post-viral and breath work that is particularly relevant, or whether it's just good for everybody. I don't know.
I think it's good for everybody, but I think, with long COVID, a lot of people, as I say, develop this dysautonomia, which is an imbalance with the sympathetic, the fight and flight, and the rest of digest. So if you can do specific forms of breath work that activate the vagus nerve, which then will increase heart rate variability, then that can only be a good thing.
Okay, from Dr. Tam Lewis to March. And in March, I was lucky enough to interview one of my favourite authors. I've got 4 of her books on my Kindle. Sarah Ockwell-Smith is a parenting author. And whenever there's a parenting issue that we need to read something about, I turn to her first. She is the author of the Gentle Parenting series. And we talked about calm parenting on the podcast. And I really do think, if anyone's listening to this and they're a parent, you will enjoy Sarah Ockwell-Smith's work. But actually, anybody who spends time with children, whether they're parents, childcare professionals, teachers or grandparents, and it doesn't matter how old the children are, either whether they're babies, toddlers, tweens, teens or anything else, I think you'll find her work really good. Her books have helped me so much with parenting. She's quite a character as well. And so I approached her, and it took ages to set this podcast up. I think we booked it in about 6 months in advance because she's so busy and she's got a multi-book deal with whoever it is. So this was episode 372, and it was Sarah Ockwell-Smith on Zestology.
It's not possible to be calm all the time. So I think you have to start with that. And it's not aiming to be perfect. I spend actually a lot of time in the book telling parents, actually, it's okay when you're not calm. It's okay to lose your temper. It's okay to scream and shout, which I think a lot of people are really shocked by. But it's knowing what to do when you do lose your temper and you do lose your calm to kind of make things right again. And actually, one thing I talk about is it's really important that we're not calm. And it's really important that we do mess up and we are stressed and shouty, because it's only in those occasions that we can show our children how to apologize genuinely and reconnect when we've had, as adults, we're really bad at disagreements and arguments because we don't know how to communicate and resolve them. So it's about that as well. But yeah, so, one of the chapters talks about knowing the signs of burnout, which in our lives today, even taking COVID out of the equation, we are just all exhausted.
Yeah.
And we're trying to be brilliant at work and brilliant parents, and you can't have everything. You have to make compromises and sacrifices. So there's a lot of talk, there's a whole chapter on talking about perfectionism and how that's really damaging as a parent. And how there's a chapter on comparison, for instance, if you've got Instagram as a parent and then you're looking at somebody else's Instagram and they always seem calm and they're doing great activities, and how it's not real, is it? It's not real life. You're comparing your messy insides with the curated illusion of somebody else's. But I think what we must understand is there is no one answer to being calmer, because there are 101 different reasons why individually we all struggle. And the key is it's sort of unpacking everything that leads us to that point. So even stress, that there are thousands of causes of stress and they're unique for us all. So it's trying to find out what's uniquely happening to us and going on our own, without sounding like a self-help cliche, like going on our own journey.
Yeah.
Which will be different to everybody else's.
I do think that despite knowing all the pitfalls of social media, and, it's nothing new to say, you shouldn't compare yourself to someone else on social media. When it comes to parenting, it takes up so much of your time and your headspace that we've, for example, have got some friends who had a baby 6 months or so ago, and her Instagram feed in particular is beautifully curated, and all they seem to do is go to museums and galleries and meet for lunches. And Faith and I have said more than once, we've said, why did we never deal with it as well as that? I mean, we've had that conversation, so we fell into that, but even though we sort of know not to do that. So it is hard parenting. Yeah.
I remember, like, when I was younger, my house would be a complete tip. But if I took a picture for Facebook, because it was then, I would pick the corner that looked immaculate, and I'd be literally surrounded like a bomb site. But my picture would look like I was like, my house was immaculate, and I'd go and put my makeup on, and it's stupid. I don't know why we do it to ourselves, but that's and I think it's partly due to the culture we live in now is so unsupportive of families, and we don't raise our children with tribes and herds around us anymore. So we've created this artificial one, and it's even going further, as it will raise kids with the metaverse at some point. But we're trying to recreate those tribes and those herds, and it can be so helpful and so useful, but it can also be so incredibly toxic.
From Sarah Ockwell-Smith to the very next week. Episode 373, the week after, was with Matt Rudd on Zestology. Matt Rudd is deputy editor at the Sunday Times magazine, which he joined over 20 years ago. And I read Matt Rudd's column every week, so I was delighted to chat to him. He brought out a book all about, I think it's called Man Down, and it's all about men and happiness. And as he says, on the surface, men don't have much to complain about. At work, they still get paid more than women for doing the same jobs. At home, as he says, they still shirk most of the unpaid labour. And he says putting the bins out doesn't count. But beneath the surface, it's a different story. And I found him incredibly self-effacing and understated and good company and thoughtful. I sort of want to be friends with Matt Rudd, actually. I'm not going to admit it to his face, but he's good fun. So here is Matt Rudd, who was a Zestology guest this year.
Having spent 4 years researching male mental health, exploring my own male mental health, I can see, even though, I've done all of this, I think the next generation's so much more clued into all of this stuff. But I can also see, we've got our eldest is doing his GCSEs, and we say, doesn't matter, don't worry about the grades with that type of parent, whilst obviously also quietly hoping they do all right. The pressure's there. And then that hurdle's gone, and it's the next one. And we've got such a brilliant conveyor belt for getting people to, get through and contribute to society. I think the next step is going to be really kind of rethinking the whole education system, making it more Swedish. They're so great in Sweden. Oh my God, could have a whole hour on that.
Yeah.
Lots of different areas: parenting, childbirth, early careers, how you start your careers, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
There's loads of different things that were just a few tweaks. And this word is overused, but authenticity is a thing that I'm not there yet. But I do feel like when I emerged from my doldrums and started thinking everyone's feeling like this, everyone's stressed, just relax and you're doing okay. Since then, I felt, I feel more authentic. Maybe I don't and I'm lying.
I'm sure you do. I think you've spent enough time on all of this. And I think it's, I think it's people really appeals to people when you're sort of honest. You say, I don't have all the answers, but I'm sort of looking into it. And that's the job of a journalist as well. And I'm interested to know about how things are for you now. You know, it's deadline day for you with the Sunday Times magazine. You're in the office. I know that you live in the country. I mean, that sounds to me like a pretty long day, full stop, coming into London, getting on the train, being in the office. What's your day like today, and how has it changed from before writing this book?
It's horrendous, and it hasn't changed at all,
hasn't it? Oh no! So where do you live?
Definitely. I'm not. What? Oh, I live in Kent.
In Kent, yeah.
It's a hellish. It's been a good commute because everyone else has been, you know, staying at home.
Yeah.
Wives. So it's none of the fundamentals have changed, but the way I approach that it has, which is not a very helpful answer. But yeah, I think I'm more relaxed about the what ifs. That's my big, because, you know, what if X happens? Well, we'll deal with it when it does. And so right now it's a busy day. I don't know what I'm going to write for my column tomorrow, and I've got to race home and go via. You know, we're all in the same. We've all got loads of rubbish to do, but it's how you approach them, which again is a really unhelpful, vague answer. Shall I tell you about the happy man I met during the whole research for this book?
Yes, please. Yeah.
He's the happiest man in Britain.
Okay.
And I can tell you, because you said you're reading the book, you haven't got to the end.
Yes, so I haven't. Yeah.
So your listeners don't need to buy the book. He was a young man in Southampton, and he'd done all the, you know, he set up a burglar alarm installation business with his dad, and, you know, on his way, got a mortgage and a girlfriend and all of that. And they had all these, because burglar alarms are, you have an older client base, let's just put it that way. So spending all day having coffee with octogenarians, and they were spending all day reflecting on what they would have done if they could be his age again.
Right.
And so, to cut a medium length story short, he was really into Loch Ness monster spotting when he was a kid. He loved Loch Ness. So he went up to Loch Ness and has been living there for 28 years.
Wow. This podcast is brought to you by Bond Charge and their blue light blocking glasses. A fantastic bit of kit. I'm so pleased to have teamed up with a company that sells the best blue blocking glasses, because let's be honest, this month you're probably getting a lot of late nights and your sleep is a little bit disrupted, and their blue light glasses can help you with just getting a little bit more circadian friendly. You know, whether it's you're looking at a computer too much, so you get headaches and sore eyes, or you have a bit of light sensitivity, so you get migraines and stress, or the sleep is an issue, and I hear you, in December, and you've got poor sleep and fatigue and low energy, or maybe even jet lag, their blue light blocking and computer glasses and light sensitivity glasses are fantastic, and I've been trying them out, and I can say two things. Firstly, in fact, I can say three things. Firstly, they work great, and they're very stylish. Secondly, I think they're redder. They block out more of the blue light than any of the other blue light glasses that I've ever tried. They are 100%. They really block it out. It's great. The third thing I'd say is they're very comfortable. They've obviously put a lot of thought into making these comfortable glasses. And well, since I've been wearing them, I've been sleeping a little bit better, and it's really nice to wear in the evening. Watch a bit of Netflix in bed or on the sofa with some Bond Charge blue light glasses. It's definitely worth going to check them out. I'm really delighted to have partnered with Bond Charge, and I really think that it is so on brand for Zestology, improving your sleep, improving your circadian rhythm, getting a little bit more primal, and going to Bond Charge and using the coupon code Tony20 to save 20%, not just on their blue light glasses, but on everything. Okay, so they've got the computer glasses, the light sensitivity glasses, the blue light blocking glasses, but they've also got infrared light. They've got other sleep devices and stuff for your sleep as well. It's it's almost like somebody has said, we're going to take all the infrared and blue light blocking glasses out there, and we're going to create one site for biohackers. You're going to love it. BONCHARGE.com. Use the code Tony20 at bondcharge.com. They ship all over the world, and they've even got EMF devices. That's why it's such a biohacker site. Over the coming months, we're going to look at some of those sites as well. But bondcharge.com, use the code Tony20. Now, back to the show. This is the Zestology Review of the Year show, and in April, I recorded a podcast in Thailand. Just a brief flavour of episode 376 then with Brett Moran and Georgia Langridge. We went over there on holiday, and Brett is a good friend of mine, and Georgia a new friend who we were able to spend some time with over there. And it was just, Brett's been on this podcast loads before, but it was great to record a podcast out there. And as I said, this podcast has travelled around the world this year, so here's a little flavour of what we recorded on episode 376.
I feel like it's good to have vision. Like you have then a future person, like my future self. It kind of pulls you towards your destiny, you know? So like going many years ago, I was like, wow, I want to be cleaner for drugs and I want to be this better role model for my daughter. I want to be a good person. But then I'm out drinking, smoking and doing all the things. I'm like, I'm not aligned with my future self. So I think it's very good to have a vision, like a 5 or a 10-year vision, if you like, because then it actually shows you back to reality, like my behaviors and actions are not aligned with that person I want to become. So I definitely think it's good to have that vision. And now, yeah, I've got a vision like the next 10 years to open yoga studios around the world, you know, write books and really spread meditation. Again, for the last couple of years, seeing how much it impacted people, I think now more than ever before. If you're not meditating, if you're not kind of looking at your mental health in that positive way, you're definitely going to suffer. Like that's just, the world is just going to get kind of a lot more busier, a lot more hectic. And if you're not in control of the mindset, then it's just going to be scary for you. So my vision in the 10 years is just to really raise consciousness and spread meditation much. Yeah. But without any attachment to it. I'm just still going to drink coconuts, float along on the beach, be immature and silly. Yeah. And if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, I've done my best.
And how much of the 10-year vision is location-based? Because obviously it's all very well saying, hey, just have a great mindset, guys. You'll be all right. But in 7 years' time, Georgia, you're in your 20s, you're living the dream here. Can you honestly see yourself living in London in your mid-30s?
I mean, it's not part of my plan. You know, I feel like the past 2 years served me so well. And like when I flew into England, like not knowing how long that lockdown was going to be, I genuinely thought like, okay, this is going to be like 6 to 8 weeks and I'll be back on a plane in Thailand again. And I was actually speaking to my dad the other day because I didn't have anywhere to stay. I didn't really have any things. And my mum put me up in her living room. And again, thinking that was just going to be like a couple of weeks, then I'd be back on a plane in Thailand. And that sofa bed that I was sleeping on is now at my dad's house. And I was on the phone to him and he said, did you sleep on this for 19 months? And he pointed to this sofa bed and I was like, yeah. And he was like, why? Yeah. And it was honestly just one of those things where it just like the back falls down and it's flat and it's got like a very small padding on it. And I said to him, like, I genuinely, every single month that I was there was like, okay, by this point next month, I'll be in Thailand. Every time we did a teacher training, it's like, by the next one, I'll be in Thailand. By the next one, I'll be in Thailand. And that was 19 months of being there in that. But that was 19 months where I never gave up hope, never gave up belief, where I continued to have that vision and that dream to be here. But I also learned that actually that practice kept me in there in those 19 months without going, I give up, I'm going to like have a mortgage and a house, or I'm going to buy a bed, I'm going to agree to being, like, that was never there. So I know wherever I am in the world, like Brett said, like, you take yourself with you. So for me, yeah, maybe I will end up there. Maybe I'll be in Mexico. Maybe I'll be in Bali. Who knows where I will be? But I know that if I'm there with you, that part, I think, was so strengthened in those 2 years. For me, it doesn't matter where I am.
And going back to what you were saying, there's nothing worse than like being able to spend loads of money on a bed. I resent it. Beds are so expensive, aren't they?
And the thing is, it was like in my mind, it was like, if you buy a bed, you're agreeing to being here. Yeah. Like you're saying to yourself, this is where I am, this is where I settled. And I just had this I genuinely kept saying, like, within a couple of weeks, like, you will be in Thailand, you'll be there, you'll be wherever you are. But 19 months or 19 days, like whatever it is, like when you're then here, like now it feels like a millisecond. It's just a moment in time. But it gives me more inspiration and more motivation as well, like to look at the decisions that I do make. Like when I made that choice then, I never had
the clarity or the certainty in that mindset to make a decision that I believe I would now if I was faced with the same choice.
You wouldn't go back if there was another lockdown.
Absolutely not. And again, I think that would then change the decisions that I make in 10 years' time as to, okay, where are you going to go next? Where do you want to be?
From Thailand to America, although I didn't record this one in person, August Bryce was on episode 380, and I always love talking about screens, electromagnetic fields, and tech wellness. And August Bryce is my go-to woman for that. And we talked about EMF blocking phone cases. Do they work? We talked about crystals for blocking EMFs. Do they work? Healthy screen time, leaving your phone out of the bedroom. Over 15% of people look at their phone during sex was one of the topics that we discovered. Why? And so much more. And I always love talking to August Bryce. So she definitely makes my highlights reel of 2022.
With tech wellness, what I want to talk about is conscious screen consumption. And that's what you're talking about. And if you know, and it's true, that you sleep better when it's outside the room, possibly the blue light, possibly just even though it's on airplane mode, sometimes you're in that phantom airplane mode. Sometimes there can be a little bit of energy coming from it. You don't even know. Sometimes people leave their notifications on even when it's on airplane mode. So they get those little interruptions, but there are so many different reasons it can affect us. And one proven study, 800 students were, given little tasks to do on the computer. And what they found out here, that the whole meaning of this research was how much cognitive capacity does our phone take up in our brain that has limited cognitive capacity? We only have so much. And so they found that if the phone was turned off, completely off and turned over, it could still take up to 30% of someone's cognition. The phone had to be outside the room, safely tucked away. Out of sight, yes, out of mind, for people to be able to focus on the task 100%. So take that into the bedroom. So the phone's there and the focus is sleep. And then the focus is waking up with remembering your dreams, maybe running to your gratitude journal, thinking about the goals for the day. Well, it's interrupted if the phone is within vision distance, even if it's turned off and over. It's like it's calling your name, Tony.
It certainly is. It's not a natural way to wake up, because the first thing you think is, I'll check my phone. And you don't give yourself even just a few moments to properly wake up. It's quite alarming, isn't it?
Isn't it? And well, now it's been proven. It's in a very good scientific study.
That's fascinating. I'm really interested in that. And I still think that people don't, and I'm including myself in this, I don't have the self-control. I mean, often I'll check it in the middle of the night if it's in the room.
Wow.
And I know, and I know all this stuff, and I'll still check it in the middle of the night. I know it's bad. Wow. So it's not in there now anyway. But listen,
wait. One thing I have to tell you. Did I tell you this last time? Had this study actually come out? This is a crazy study by SureCell that said that they interviewed 1,000 people and 17% admitted to looking at their phone during sex. What? What?
Yeah.
Right?
What? That is extraordinary.
Yes. I mean, and people there are so many different numbers out there, but the Pew Research, I think from 2019, found out that people look at their phone up to 262 times a day. So this feels like another planet to me, because since I do have electromagnetic sensitivity, I don't love holding my phone. I don't love being around my phone. And since I'm all about balance, I have a grounding walk every morning. I write in my gratitude journal every day. I'm pretty, into the analog life, and I love it. I have a beautiful analog alarm clock, German made, that I just adore. Do you love that clock? And so anyway, it's hard for me to fathom needing or wanting to pick up my phone that much. And for those people who are there, just a little bit of conscious cell phone consumption, a little bit of realizing that if your phone is making you feel bad, put it down. Because a lot of that energy that we get when we're looking at our phones isn't pleasant. Sometimes we feel pulled.
No, exactly.
Sometimes we feel stressed. So if that little thing that was designed to make your life great isn't making you feel good, put it down.
Interrupting this podcast for one moment to remind you that my podcast partner today is Bioptimizers and Masszymes. And Bioptimizers are my regular podcast partners, but a particularly timely product for this month because it's the holiday season. There's a lot of digestion going on in the holiday season, and I know that only too well myself because I had my mate's Christmas party this week, and we went out to a Thai restaurant in London, and it just stuff got consumed that I didn't expect. Thai whiskey, for one. And I know that's not very zestology, but that's just what happened. And also some very rich food as well, which is why I was very thankful to have some digestive enzymes to hand. Namely Masszymes. Did you know your natural ability to digest food declines with age? Fewer enzymes means more difficulty digesting food, especially at certain times of the year, like Christmas parties with your friends. And that is where supplementing with a high-quality enzyme supplement can be a huge help. And I recommend Masszymes by Bioptimizers. So listen, this is really great for Christmas, Christmas Day, a big festive party, a night out with your mates, Thai whiskey. For an exclusive offer for my listeners, just go to masszymes.com/zestology. That is Masszymes, masszymes.com/zestology, and use the code zestology10 to get 10% off. But actually you can get up to almost 50% off, because I just went and had a look at that site and you can get almost 50% off. Now that code also works in the UK, zestology10 on the UK Bioptimizers site as well. But if you're in the US, it's masszymes.com/zestology. That is the last time I'm having Thai whiskey in a long time. Back to the show. Okay, this is the review of the year show. And in June, it was the Health Optimisation Summit and Glastonbury. And I recorded podcasts at both of them. The Summit, a brilliant event in Islington in London, hosted by biohacker Tim Gray. And actually, it's his summit, and I was hosting the stage there. So that was a really nice thing to do myself. I did present there as well and do a presentation there too. But it was just a fun weekend. So many biohacks to try out, people to see, great speakers. Ben Greenfield spoke live and I introduced him on the stage. And I recorded a podcast there with Mark Scott. So here is Mark Scott and a little flavour of the Health Optimisation Summit.
We are recording now. Mark, how are you doing?
Very good, Tony. How are you?
Yeah, it's really nice to see you in person. It's really the first time we've met properly this weekend, isn't it?
Absolutely. And what a weekend to meet on.
Yeah, it's good back
down in London. It's a phenomenal weekend here at the summit. I've really enjoyed it. And
yes,
great to be around like-minded people again.
It is. You are obviously well known for biohacking our pets, but you also do a lot on yourself, don't you? What sort of grabbed your attention this weekend, or what is obsessing you at the moment? Because I love to ask that question.
I think just back to basics. Like, you forget the simple stuff that you're doing. Like, I was just chatting with my wife, Sadie, who we both know, fortunately.
Yeah.
And we were just chatting about actually we do a lot already, whether it's the filtered water, whether it's, the work bands, whether it's, the infrared lighting, the saunas, all the stuff. And you're walking around and go, actually, if I was here, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, I'd be overwhelmed. But now each year I've done a bit more, probably like yourself, you realize, even like we're talking about intermittent fasting, it's just part of your life now. It's not a big issue. You're like, I haven't eaten yet, or dinner hasn't arrived. No worries, you're under stress.
Yeah.
And it's those sort of things that you just work into your life, and you realize, actually, that didn't happen in the last 6 months. That's like 6 to 8, 10 years worth of just doing things and just incorporating in the life. I think once it becomes a habit, you just forget about it. And that's what I think coming back here reminds me.
Yeah.
And also how many super smart people are out there.
I know. I know.
Scary smart people.
Well, you mentioned the intermittent fasting. It was a very late night last night, wasn't it? And I couldn't have got through this morning without a good proper fast, just a lot of black coffee, and that was it.
I was on the opposite. I'm like, I woke up this morning, had a bit of drink, and I haven't been drinking for 6 months.
Yeah.
And the first thing I did was get a breakfast. I'm like,
that's because you traveled last night. Right, expenses were down.
Absolutely. And I think I think you listen to your body a lot more, don't you? You just like to tune in.
Yeah.
And I don't stress about the small stuff, whether I have the odd thing over there, because I can just fast, I can just compensate, as long as I'm not doing it all the time, I think.
And that's the healthiest thing of all, isn't it? To not get too hung up and stressed about any one thing. Because you can be, and I know I've been there, like you can get, as a biohacker, you can get pretty hung up on, oh my God, I had 3 peanuts.
That's right, yeah. And that is critical here. I think it's giving yourself a break and not being too hard on yourself. And it's this whole holistic approach to life, it's you give yourself a break. And the worst critic is often the inner critic. So, not listening too bad to that. But I think overall, no, it's a great weekend just to remind us of all of how easy it is to implement these things in the eye and make those choices.
Now, when we last spoke, I didn't use mouth tape. Well, I do now, and I think I'll do it until I die.
I tried the muscle, and I just 2 o'clock in the morning, ripping it off,
ripping it off your beard off.
Absolutely, making it squeal like a pig. But taking the magnesium in, all those things, I just find, I've got my sleeping protocol that Sadie's printed out for me that I just, buy and all that kind of stuff. So I think those basic hacks, they're built into your life. Even just when you're training, and being able to do basis of our HIIT exercises, get it done in 10 minutes, 20 minutes, not doing like a marathon, all those little, again, they're just hacks. So there's ways of living. And it's the same, as I'm passionate about pet food, pet wellness. It's the same with pets. We often think we have to walk the dogs for miles and miles. No, actually, just do some mind games, playing with them, hiding treats in places. That could just be as stimulating. How you walk with a senior dog as opposed to walking with a puppy. All of these things we're learning about in the new world we're applying to the pet world. Even the gut biome. I'm on a massive mission to connect gut biomes from dogs and have the biggest gut biome for pets in the UK. That's my next goal. We'll start to prove how all these things like worming tablets and all these injections could be affecting the gut biome and what impact that has on dogs, as well as feeding dogs, low-grade food like kibbles and stuff like that. So that's my mission over the next 5 years. So all the stuff that we're learning, because the gut biome stuff really interests me in the human world, because it's so easy to apply that as a pet and really understand it.
So that was the Health Optimisation Summit, and that was podcast 385 if you want to listen to all of that. And then a few weeks later, it was Glastonbury. And Glastonbury was episode 389 on this podcast. So I was there, and I just thought, do you know what? I'm going to bust out my recording gear and record a podcast here, because this is brilliant. And it was the first time I'd been to Glastonbury since the 90s and the mud baths of the 90s. And it was a very different story.
So where we are now, there's a mix of very much smaller tents with bands and a lot of campaigning tents. There's the Southwest Campaign Against Nuclear War and Nuclear Missiles just next to me. There's Just Stop Oil. And right next to me, there is the CND movement, formed in 1957 with the red peace sign, now internationally known as a symbol of peace. And they've adapted it onto they put a Banksy image on the back of their tent, which first appeared in 2003 outside the Houses of Parliament during an anti-Iraq war protest by the man who lived for a decade in a peace camp in Parliament Square. So that's what I can see. But there's all sorts of other wellness stuff which is fairly wild and wonderful. I've just walked past an astrology tent where you can go way deeper than reading your star sign in the paper. There's quite a lot of chanting, which, do you know what? I like a bit of chanting. I haven't had time to get involved in it this weekend, but I like a bit of chanting. All sorts of Reiki and massage. Lots of stuff around sustainability. Ed Miliband and Jenny Jones, former leader of the Green Party, have spoken today. Billy Bragg, obviously a regular here at Glastonbury. And we went to Billy Bragg's tent last night to see. And here's my wife and my friend Jazz as well. So where have you been? Where have you both been?
Well, we've just wandered up from the Sonic stage, had a really good boogie, and we got waylaid, didn't we, with Carl Cox. For 5 minutes, had a cheeky dance, and then we came up here.
Okay. Jazz, you're a bit of a Glastonbury veteran. What is your tip for staying energised over 5 days when it's this? I mean, how do you do it? Because you've been here, this is your 4th day.
Fifth time at Glastonbury.
5th time at Glastonbury, and 4th day here. Yeah. So what's the tip for staying energised?
I had a really good night's sleep. It helps having a good tent, blackout 10.
Oh, yeah.
It really helps. And earplugs as well.
Earplugs. Yeah. You've got the quiet on earplugs, haven't you? Yeah. I've got them as well. But I realise I like to think of myself as hardcore, but I just really didn't enjoy sleeping in a sleeping bag last night. I felt like it was a straitjacket.
I was just so knackered more than walking. It just really helped. I had such a good night's sleep, and I just felt great today, and I'm ready to do it again.
And you know the best place for coffee, right? It was Toltz. It was sort of around there, wasn't it? Yeah.
Around the corner from the meeting point. Yeah, amazing coffee.
Good coffee is a must. We should get XL coffee here. Well, I just said on this podcast, if you're tuning in hoping for words of wisdom, you're not going to get many from me today. It's just a little flavour of what's going on.
Yeah.
And we're going to go and have some fun now, aren't we? There's all sorts of interesting things in this field.
Oh, yeah.
There's so much to do here in the healing field.
Yeah.
It really is,
Yeah. I fancy some energy clearing.
Energy clearing?
And a massage as well, which you had a massage.
I did it on the first day. I definitely recommend having it on the first day because my shoulders were hurting from carrying like backpack and stuff, and it just helped me relax, and I just feel so much better and energized after having it.
Well, what is energy clearing?
I don't know. I feel like my chakras would benefit.
Sums us up, doesn't it? We don't know what it is, but we'll go and do it.
I feel like I could definitely do that in this field, though.
Yes, definitely.
It's the place to be.
What about the astrology tent that we part? What's going on there?
I mean, also that looked good. There were a lot of workshops, weren't there?
Workshops?
Yeah.
And I've seen chanting workshops.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I mean, that's a bit of me. Yeah. I'd love to go to one of that.
It's chanting and manifesting at the same time.
Fantastic. Let's go get involved.
Okay, from June, we're going to go straight to September. And on episode 401, I was able to interview someone that I've known a lot about in the past, and you may well know his name as well. If you ever watched the film The Secret, you will know that one of the principal contributors in The Secret was Dr. John DeMartini, and very famous expert and extraordinary internationally published author of over 40 self-development books and manuscripts. And he was in the movie The Secret, obviously. He's been featured in documentaries with people like Hugh Jackman, and he's a renowned human behaviour expert. And one of the things I found absolutely extraordinary is he lives on a boat all the time. And we did the interview with him on his boat. So here is Dr. John DeMartini on Zestology.
I don't get distracted by social media. I post things. I send things to be posted to my team, and then they take care of that. But I don't find myself distracted by it because I'm on a mission. I don't get sidetracked by gossip or conversations or blogs or that's not priority to me. I feed my mind with the highest priority information I possibly can on a daily basis and disseminate a synthesis of that the best I can. So if somebody's distracted by it, it's only because they're not focused. I always say if you're not filling your day with high priority actions that inspire you, it's going to fill up with low priority distractions that don't. So it's not really the world out there that's doing anything. It's our perception, decisions, and actions in the world that does everything. So if somebody's allowing that to happen, that means they haven't found what's more important in their life, and they're allowing those things to distract them. When you really have something inspiring to do, you're focused on it, you don't get distracted. You're busy doing what you really love to do.
You mentioned that you fill your mind with the highest priority information. Go into that a little bit more. How does that look?
Well, I set out when I was 18 to master my life. And I was watching David Carradine on Kung Fu. There was a show in the 70s called Kung Fu. And he talked about the Shaolin master. And so I said, I want to be a master. I thought that sounded cool. And so I started going down that route and finding what exactly is a master. So in my pursuit of that, I decided that life had 7 areas of life. We had a mental quest and a vocational quest, a financial quest, a family quest, a social quest, a physical fitness quest, a health quest, and a spiritual quest. So I said, well, let's define what mastery would be in those areas. And I wrote out how I perceived it. Now, everybody's going to have a different view because they're going to filter their world to their values. But I decided I wanted to create original ideas that served human beings on the planet, and did something that, that the information I presented would be solid. I wanted to create a global business, an international business for its students in every country in the world. I wanted to have financial independence where I was working because I love to, not because I have to. I wanted to have a global family where we lived around the world, which is one of the reasons I live on this ship. I wanted to have social influence and hang out with people that are doing extraordinary things and leaving their mark in the world. I want to have a vital body. I'm 68 and I'm still cranking and doing 18-hour days and cranking pretty well consistently. And I want to do something that brought inspiration to people. So that was mapped out at age 18, 50 years ago. And I made a commitment to study every possible discipline, any possible information that might expedite that process. That's what I'm going to fill my mind with. So that led me to the various disciplines and ologies that an individual could study, which took me to the dictionary and encyclopedia to make a list of them. I realized the average PhD reads about 100 books on those topics. So I said, I'm going to read 100 books in every one of those disciplines and extract out the most essential information out of there to build a body of knowledge with to present. And then I'm going to synthesize that and organize that. And I found that when I was studying the various disciplines and ologies, I usually went to the founders, the originators, the people that were the neologists that came up with the terms that forerun, the pioneers of that field, and go there. Because if I'm studying the pioneers, I'll increase the probability of me being a pioneer. Most of them were polymaths, so I decided I wanted to be a polymath from René Descartes. And so I just devoured everything I could for the last 50 years, every moment I can, that if I'm not speaking, I'm researching and writing to organize knowledge. And then I want to make sure when I share something with something, it's solid, that I can rely on it. It's cross-disciplinary and it's not a refutable piece of work. So that was my dream. And I work on it every single day. And I don't have idle time because I'm busy pursuing that. And there's no end to learning because whenever you know, that you'll always know that you know less as you go. So it keeps you inspired to keep wanting to grow.
From September to October, and I spoke to Debs de Vries at the end of October, episode 407. And we spoke about developing intuition and one of my favourite specialised subjects, what I have trained into the highest level you can train in, and that is neuro-linguistic programming and the law of requisite variety as well, which is one of my favourite laws. We also spoke about working with dreams, a tribal approach to parenting, and lots more as well. And Debs de Vries is an old friend who I bumped into after about 10 years this summer when I was presenting at Verve Festival in Wiltshire. And it was so nice to see her. And it was one of those podcasts where I really did feel zesty after recording.
I know that an intelligence that's greater than my little one that's contained in this body is also helping to, let's just say, realign and re-energize the subtle, invisible systems. Truth is, Tony, a bit of a mystery story. Isn't the first time this has happened to me, but I had a dream.
You changed your life because of a dream?
3 times now.
No way.
First dream was you have to go and dance tango. That was a life changer. Second one was you're going to be a voice artist. That's when I met you.
Yeah.
Third one, so in my sleep, I saw 4 little parcels all wrapped up in beautiful paper, emerald, sapphire, gold, and ruby. And my voice inside my head went, okay, you've got skills that are physical, emotional, psychological, and spiritual. You must bundle them up and take them to midlife women. It was in 2014. And I fell out of bed and I did what most people do in the morning, my underwear drawing, circling around. Because to me, it's obvious now how it fits in. But then it was like, what's Tantra got to do with emotions? And as I stood there, and you know how it is, you ask the question, I was like, and there's some astrology in here.
Mm.
It's a big astrological event that happens to us in our 40s and 50s. It's like, oh my gosh, no wonder women are struggling. This is like throwing petrol onto a fire that nobody even knows is burning. So I had enough. I was like, got it. So I ran downstairs. I made a little Facebook event. I booked an event space, and I just did a little retreat called Menopause Magic. I was like, what are you doing, Deb? I'm like, who told you you could go do this?
Yeah.
But it's like I say, it's not about me. It's about something about me that knows that it's ready to do something else. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done it.
Yeah. So there's quite a lot of, I mean, it's really interesting you talk about dreams, because I think a lot of people who listen to my podcast are quite into the sort of biohacking, but they might be more into the sciencey side. They're like, oh, dreams, whatever. And that's certainly how I used to be. And then a few years of therapy sorted that out, because every time I went to my therapist, I'd talk about dreams, and that was the subject of the conversation. It was brilliant, you know. But you're talking quite a bit about intuition as well, aren't you? And because dreams are probably part of that. They help you tap into your intuition and your right brain. And there's quite a lot of intuition, it seems, in what you do then.
Yes, I'd like to say it's grounded for anyone watching. You know, I'm a quantum physicist. I'm a quantum physics study buddy with a quantum physics theorist.
Wow.
So I keep my finger on the pulse, because I'm actually a very practical woman, and it's taken me years to come to terms with the fact that these invisible gifts, as you say, are as much a part of us than, you know, the way that we, I don't know, make a cake.
Yeah.
Dreams, there are tribes that say that those who lose touch with their dreams lose touch with their soul, lose touch with humanity.
Really?
Because I see dreams in 3 distinct categories, but essentially they're an aspect of myself communicating with the outside part of myself and saying, hey, this is some information you haven't been able to see in the sunlight. It's like the lunar part of us, that part of us that's actually working all the time through the body systems to help our senses assimilate information. And we cut out so much, don't we? Cut out so much information. So my dreams have played a very important role in my life since midlife.
From October to November, and Zora Ben-Hamu was in London to hack her age and hack our age as well. She was actually here for a conference, which she spoke about on the podcast. But she is an anti-aging expert, Zora Ben-Hamu, and she's become a friend. She's the founder of the website Hack My Age and the Hack My Age podcast, and author of the Longevity Master Plan. And she was here to talk about peptides, because she was at a peptides conference. And if you don't know what peptides are, then it's worth a Google and worth a listen of episode 408. And Zora and I also spoke about platelet-rich plasma, anti-aging, circadian rhythm, gerontology, digital nomadism, which she's been doing longer than the words existed, and loads more.
Gerontology is the study of aging from not only a biological perspective, but from a psychological perspective and sociological perspective. So we do study older adults. We focus a lot on them, but we have to look at the whole life course from birth to death.
Yeah.
So we look at childhood experiences, or any experience in your life during that life course will impact your genes, the diseases that you may or may not have. And so it's really, really important to look at the whole life course perspective when you have something that's going on. Or if you're worried about your parents and you see they have Alzheimer's, does that mean you'll get it? Well, I don't know. You may have some genetic predispositions, but it may depend on how you've been living your life throughout the life course. So that's what gerontology is, and that's what we've learned. And interestingly enough, we didn't talk a lot about light, and I asked about sleep, and I asked about breathing, right? It's the biohacker in me.
Yeah.
And this is a research-based university. I went to USC and University of Southern California. And so I think the whenever I brought this up, absolutely, it was recognized that this is an important part of aging. And we do know that being outdoors and being in the
good. So it's making it over to the mainstream, as well as the sort of biohackery fringe, like you and I. They do acknowledge at USC that does make an impact.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, they do. But they don't have. It's not a big. It's because I asked. It's not like they had a whole curriculum on sunlight or breathing, which I would love to have. So,
what about your personal practice then? What do you, in terms of your own personal sort of light? I mean, there might not be a practice, but do you make sure to go outside early in the day? Are you sort of blue blocking at night? What are you looking at in terms of light?
Yeah. So what we know is that our circadian rhythm is affected by light and food and many other things too. But light does have a huge impact. And you're spot on. Seeing this with your son is, why is his sleep disrupted? Could very well be because the amount of times. And not only, it's not that it's just the sunlight, right? But it's what are you doing when you're outdoors too that has an impact. He's running around. So you could be sitting on a bench or running. And that will have a different impact too on the physiology. But just the fact that you're outdoors is already something, and that's a huge plus. And so we do know that the spectrum of light that we get from all different parts of the day have an impact on your health and your well-being. And that's why we say the red light that we see in the sunrise or in a sunset has a different impact on your body than if you're just walking around in the middle of the day. And there are benefits to all these spectrums. Unfortunately, how many times do you get to watch a sunrise or a sunset?
I mean, most of the time it's grey here in London anyway.
Yeah, but even if it's grey, you still have it's and what we don't see is the spectrum of light. There's not only red light, there's blue, green, and all of these other spectrums that our body needs. And so that's why the people who use the blue blocking glasses, which I know you have, I have them, and I use them actually during the time I'm on the computer when the sun starts to go down, because when you're outside before noon, and you probably already know this too, is that your body gets the signal that it should produce melatonin later on. Like it's a suppression of melatonin.
Yeah.
Right? We don't want to have melatonin in the morning because we need to move around and get on with our day. And then as the sun goes down, we turn on all the lights, we look at our phones, we're on our computers. The body thinks that it's still daylight and it's not ready to produce melatonin. It's going to say, push it down till later. So that's why if you shut your computer, you try to go to sleep, well, good luck, because your mind is not only running because of the information that you're processing from that last email, but it is because the blue light that's coming from the computer. And I don't want to say blue light is bad. We need blue light in the morning, right? We need it during the day.
It's time for my final little clip and highlight from 2022. And it is with Dr. Dale Bredesen, who's been on this podcast before. I was very excited and pleased to speak to one of my favourite Zestology guests again, neurologist Dr. Dale Bredesen, author of the New York Times bestselling book, The End of Alzheimer's. He had the #1 book in the world for 2 days, surpassing Hillary and Oprah. And he came on last month on Zestology.
The whole idea is for each person, we can now look at larger data sets and determine what actually caused your decline. In some people, it's mostly inflammatory. It may be because of oral microbiome changes. And unfortunately, these things in your oral microbiome are found in the brains, as the pathologists have shown us. It may be, leaky gut. It may be other causes of chronic inflammation. It may be tick-borne illness, things like that. In some people, it may be various toxins, whether they be inorganic, organic, or biotoxins. In some people, as you mentioned earlier, it's more of a vascular presentation. In some people, it's more of an atrophic presentation, reduction in vitamins, things like B12 and vitamin D, in hormones, things like estradiol, progesterone, testosterone, thyroid, all those sorts of things. Or in trophic support. BDNF is a good example where BDNF biology ties in beautifully to the biology of Alzheimer's disease. So all these things contribute. And so, yes, as you indicated, we should all be getting on active prevention. We recommend everyone who's 45 or over, please get a cognoscopy. We can really reduce the global burden of dementia if we simply get on active prevention or early reversal. And you think about it, you go through these 4 stages. Stage 1, where you actually have no symptoms, and yet already you can show, and this even occurs in your 30s sometimes, you can show changes in your PET scan and your spinal fluid. Then the second stage is called SCI, subjective cognitive impairment, and that virtually 100% of those people can get better. We see it all the time. So I'm actually happy when I see someone with one of those, like, well, we're going to make this person much, much better. That's where you know something's wrong, but you're still able to score within the normal range on your cognitive testing. And that lasts on average, according to the epidemiologists, 10 years. So the window of opportunity here is huge. The third stage is what's called mild cognitive impairment. So it's a relatively late stage of Alzheimer's disease. And unfortunately, it's called mild cognitive impairment. It's like telling someone, don't worry, you've only got mildly metastatic cancer. It's a relatively late stage of the problem. Now, despite that, the people who had that in our trial, 84% of them got better. We had some who had Alzheimer's, but most of them had late stage MCI. Then the fourth and final stage, which by definition only occurs when you're now losing activities of daily living, so you can see how severe that is what's actually dementia. That's what's typically called Alzheimer's disease. And unfortunately, the vast majority of people wait to those last 2 stages to come in, when if they would simply come in the first 2, get on active prevention or early reversal, virtually everybody would be fine. And we really could put a huge dent in the global burden of dementia. And so everybody knows, when you're 50, you go get a colonoscopy. So if you're 45 or over, please get a cognoscopy, because there's a tremendous amount that can be done. And by the way, we can do this relatively inexpensively because you have a multi-tiered approach. So if everybody goes on some basics, then a few of those people will fall through the cracks. Okay, so most of them will do fine. But some of them, as you mentioned, lifestyle, getting on appropriate diet, exercise, sleep, stress, what we call the basic 7: diet, exercise, sleep, stress, brain training, detox, and some targeted supplements. Those are the basics. Anyone can do those relatively inexpensively, and you can do just fine. Now, a few of the people will then fall through the cracks and start to have some decline. Okay, they will have a larger workup. Then they will have a larger treatment. Some of them may need to be treated for tick-borne illness, for example, something we see all the time. Some may need to be treated for oral microbiome changes, for periodontitis. For a common one is turning out to be sleep disorder breathing. I've been surprised at how common that is as a contributor. And it's a contributor not only to cognitive decline, but also to atrial fibrillation, which in itself contributes to cognitive decline.
That was Dr. Dale Bredesen, and that was a year in review of Zestology. All that remains for me to say is thank you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed listening to the podcast as much as I have recording them. I must say that when I get feedback, it's always amazing. I worked in radio for 10 years before moving to TV. And then obviously I've been doing this podcast for 7 years. And whether it's radio or podcasting, the principles are the same in that you're very much on your own. And right now, sat in my spare room, talking into a microphone, it's a solitary existence doing podcasting. And you sometimes wonder, is anybody listening? So it's really nice when you tell me that you do. I am very grateful and really appreciate it. And thank you for listening to this podcast over this year. I do appreciate it. That is pretty much it for the podcast. Just all that remains for me to say is have a great Christmas. I am back between Christmas and New Year with an in-betweeny episode. So that's going to be quite interesting. I've not done that before, but between Christmas and New Year, and it's just a personal update because I've got loads of stuff going on, which I think you'll be quite interested in. So an in-betweeny episode coming there. And in the meantime, please do go and check out our podcast partners, Massazymes. So if you go to massazymes.com/zestology, massazymes.com/zestology, and use the code Zestology10. So whenever you're going for any Biooptimizers products, it's Zestology10, and that works in the UK and the US as well. That is it for this podcast. Thanks again for listening. And just before we go, I do want to say thank you to my other podcast partners today, which are Bon Charge. So pleased to have teamed up with boncharge.com, and firstly the blue blocking glasses, which I've been posting various pictures of, and I think are rather stylish. But also they've got blue blocked light bulbs, they've got infrared lights, they've got sleep masks, and they've got all sorts of other things going on as well. So Tony20 is the code for boncharge.com. If you want to go to boncharge.com, that's boncharge.com. I've wanted to team up with a blue light glasses company for ages, but I needed to find the right one. And in fact, I've got their glasses right here. These ones, they feel really good. If you can see me now, I've got them over my headphones, and they're just nice and comfortable. They're nice and light, and they block out all the blue light. They do the job properly. So I'm so pleased to have found Bon Charge, and they do ship worldwide as well. So if you go to boncharge.com, use the code Tony20. That is it for this podcast. I will see you for the in-betweeny episode between Christmas and New Year.